You're tuned into the Writing Community Chat Show, the live streaming YouTube podcast that brings you the stories of authors, screenwriters, and more. Indie or established, this show's for the community, and we invite you to be a part of it. Head to the writingcommunitychatshow.com for more info. The WCCS. Together as one, we get it done.
Hello and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. Hello everybody and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. We are very excited to be back. It is Friday, all those good things that I say every single week, and we really mean it. It's so great to be back and chatting to you guys and to bring you another author with a great story. And lots of tips and advice for you. If it's your first time, my name's Chris. That is also Chris, just to be extra confusing for you guys. But thank you for tuning in. If you're listening back on the podcast, thank you for doing that. And if you're watching back on YouTube, thank you as well. Please do give it a thumbs up and leave some comments because that always helps other people find us as well. And we like to hear what you have to say about things. Chris, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very good. This is still the week that I'm recovering from being shafted by a Playboy bunny.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, at least I can say that now. I had a date with a Playboy bunny and she cancelled on me.
Well, apparently not. The show last week was Chris was sat there all alone waiting for the guest who didn't turn up. And there was a lot of confusion in the emails about the links that we sent. And like we do with every guest, and that's the first issue we've had with the guest not being able to get through to us. And I'm pretty sure it was on their side that the error was happening from. They definitely had the information. Ironically, was in the thread that they were talking about. So, it's an unfortunate technical error, I presume.
Yeah, but I mean, it's great for me because obviously I get to say that phrase now, and it's true.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something that I can add to it. But obviously, we missed out on a really interesting interview. Getting insight to the Playboy Mansion would have been really interesting. Obviously, talking about a new book would have been interesting as well. It's a very category of guests we've never had.
I mean, it could still happen. We just need to make sure things are right. But yeah, it would have been definitely interesting to get an insight on the Hefner world that we have all heard so much about, I'm sure.
Yeah. But yeah, other than that, it's been a really good week. Done some things. I wrote a desires list. I ran into a TikTok stream of manifestation.
That's got nothing to do with Playboy, is it?
No,
okay.
No, that was very different. Yeah, obviously with TikTok, the algorithms kick in, and if you watch one manifestation video, bang, here's all the rest. So, yeah, I was like, I should probably write a desires list because everyone's writing it. And then on the top of that list, after being rejected by a Playboy bunny, is a Tesla. So I'm hoping for one of them in the future.
Wow. Maybe just give Elon Musk a tweet and see if he can drop you one.
Yeah, sponsor the show with his car.
Yeah. Why not? Hello, Halo in the chat. Happy Friday to you. It's great to see you there as always. Chris, other news that we started this week, we launched a Kickstarter.
We did. Well, you did, because I have no idea how that works. But I'm very excited by the prospect of that Kickstarter. Not so much by the idea of actually going there and being in a haunted house. That does freak me out a little bit. But yeah, it'd be great if it does happen. Yeah.
Well, it was one of our audience, and we consider family member, Anya, who I messaged in the week, and she said it's really cold as well in that area. So not only is it going to be scary, but also cold. So if you don't know about this, and we will leave links to this everywhere, so please, if you can support us, please do so. JD Barku came on the show and was fantastic. Very, very good New York Times bestseller. Amazing books being adapted into movies and all sorts. He has got a new book coming out in May, and through random conversations we've kind of invited ourselves or been invited, I don't quite remember, to Wood Island just off Canada to stay in a real haunted place for 2 days and 2 nights. with JD himself and a paranormal investigator. So we consider this an opportunity of lifetime. You know, going over to that side of the world would be incredible for us. And to do that and vlog it and give you the best possible stupid videos of us being very scared would be brilliant. It would just be hilarious. So if you can support that, thank you so much. And I know some of you already have, so thank you to those people. Yeah, if we can make that happen this year, it will be a great addition to the Crime Writers Festival that we're going back on this year. We've had an invite for that again, to moderate for Pan Macmillan. And and we're also going to London for the launch of that program next month, Chris, which is, again, amazing things happening.
Yeah, well, again, on this manifestation journey, I said to you at the start of the year, we need to travel. We need to get out more. And yeah, 3 really good trips there that are not just, you know, pipe dreams, that are, you know, on their way to happening. And yeah, can we promise footage of a real ghost? Maybe. I sure as hell, if I'm going there, I'm going to try and get it. I'm going to take all the cameras, make sure all the batteries are working and everything. None of this, oh, look at that shadow thing in the corner. Like, you see a ghost, we're getting it on camera.
Yeah. I was thinking about it, and I'll get our guest on very soon. I know we're ranted about this, but it's exciting for us. I saw that you can get those EV recorders that pick up voices. I was thinking, can you imagine? Like, just be so funny if we got something even remotely tangible. But there you go. Let's get our guest on, Chris. Otherwise, you know, we're gonna waste a lot of time here chatting. But we will possibly, there might be enough to show if people are up for that, and we can definitely chat about that in more depth. So here we go. Tonight we have a fantastic guest, an author, a blogger, and playwright whose work spans multiple genres, from occult thrillers to paranormal romance, and even a drunken superhero on a quest for justice. His books aren't just stories, they carry deeper meanings inspired by real-life events, proving that all great fiction is rooted in truth. Beyond writing, he's a passionate supporter of the indie author community, sharing book reviews, marketing tips, and writing guides through his Hall of Information blog and Patreon. He's also an accomplished playwright, bringing fresh energy to the British stage with his pantomime adaptations, with thousands of readers, an active social media presence, and a love for storytelling, influenced by legends like Michael Crichton, Stephen King, and Arthur Conan Doyle. He's here to share his story and insights with us. Ladies and gentlemen, please give me a hand in giving a nice big warm welcome to Lee Hall. Hello, Lee.
Hello, Chris and Chris. How are you doing?
We're doing very well. First of all, thank you so much for joining us on this lovely Friday night, and we hope things are well. How are you doing?
It's great to be here. No, thank you. Thank you both for having me. Yeah, really good, actually. Really good. I've had quite a productive week. And yeah, just had my 7th BookBub featured deal. That did really well. There was sales coming from all corners of the world, it seemed. Yeah, that kind of crept up on me. I had that booked for a few weeks and it happened. I've been doing some writing as well, funny enough, some playwriting this week. And it's been quite a productive week in that sense. So yeah, how are you guys doing anyway?
Yeah, good. I did see your tweet earlier and about that deal. And you've had, I think, if I remember it correctly, around 4,500 downloads.
Yeah.
Which is incredible.
I would class that as a just a bit better than a good free promo. So most of them were free downloads. Then other books in further on in the series I discounted to 99 cents or pence or equivalent, and that drove sales as well. So it's a pretty good number. I count anything over 3,000 downloads for free as a real good effort, basically.
Absolutely.
And just to have that many people compelled to just click download is kind of something I'm still getting used to now. I've done this a few times now. It's not my first rodeo, but yeah, that's an incredible number of people who felt compelled to just, well, we're going to give that a go. Even if it is free, I mean, that's kind of been one of my tactics over many years, is to interest them with a free sample, and hopefully they come through the door and they stay, they buy something else and they read and they stay. And it's worked well for me. So it has been a really good week in that regard. Yeah,
superb. Brilliant. I mean, even if they are free, as you mentioned, I think, as you said, there's a big accomplishment to get them to download the book, but also you may get a bunch of reviews from that, which will inspire other people to pick it up as well. So the knock-on effect is huge, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I find basically BookBub have access to what I call higher end readers, who are readers who tend to review. And that's something they boast as well over on their partners website. There's a whole host of kind of resources, and they boast a lot about their readers are avid readers. They review up to 4 times a month, that type of thing. So you're going to get
Nice.
people who review your stuff from the high end readers, which is basically what you pay for. So it's been well worth the money. It really has.
Incredible. Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that in a bit, because that's something I've never used. I'm sure readers will be interested. Authors will be interested in that as well, who might not have ventured down there yet. But before we do that, we're going to find out a bit more about yourself and where you're from. So where in the world are you coming from right now?
I'm located just outside of Reading in the UK. So it's between sort of Oxford and London. Really, is a small town called Reading. I'm in the suburbs. I was previously in Oxfordshire, and yeah, and before then I lived in West London. So I'm a Londoner at heart. But yeah, got out of there in my sort of early 20s, and yeah, eventually found myself just outside of Reading.
Nice. And are you in sort of any circles in terms of writers in the local community, or is it mainly online for you?
Not really, no, just mainly online. Funnily enough, my father-in-law, Joe, is a poet. He's independently published. He does appearances, he does readings. He's the only real writer I know, or published person I know personally, and I'm in frequent contact with. Everything else is this network of wonderful followers and community of writers that I've connected with mainly through Twitter, and a few other spaces online, through my blog as well. And yeah, I mean, the writing community is definitely a force for good, and it's something I'm a big believer in. Having companionship on this journey, you know how hard it can be sometimes with writing. We have to go away, sit in a corner and be alone to write, but then the part afterwards, why not have some company? Why not embrace others who are going through similar successes and struggles? Because you learn so much from other authors. You could just put out a question from something, for anything, any problem you have, and I guarantee there'll be an author out there who has dealt with what you have faced. And based upon that, my following has grown over the many years on Twitter, and it's been inspirational, basically, to be a part of the community. It's kept me going. It's kept the doubt away so many times, and just to know there are others out there really is nice to have companionship on this journey. Yeah.
Fantastic. I like that. Okay, what we're going to do, we're going to play the first clip video, which is the road to writing. So when we come back from this very quick video, we're going to kind of learn your inspiration journey and how things started for you. So I'll play this very quickly and we'll get onto the road to writing. So Lee, what was the first point in your life where you thought, I want to be an author? And what was the first point where that became a reality?
I mean, I was always a reader as a kid. Go as far back as when I was probably 9 or 10 years old. There was a campaign, I think, for cereal, and there were Roald Dahl books that they put in the cereal boxes. I remember staying up long past bedtime reading the likes of James and the Giant Peach or Fantastic Mr. Fox. At the same time, I had a very good, wonderful primary school teacher who was very much into books, reading Tolkien. That introduced me to much more literature, and that was kind of my beginnings. And then, I don't know, active imagination, and eventually I put like the Action Man down, but the games kind of stayed in my head. And got to 11 or 12 years old, and I was like, why don't I put these down on pen and paper? And it basically, that's how it started. This was probably late 90s, early 2000s. And being a successful author was something back then that was highlighted quite well by an author who had recently published a book about Wizards, Harry Potter. I think it was only a few of the books are out by then, and it was massive. And that really kind of propelled my dream. I thought, well, I could one day have success like that. Maybe my books could be converted to films and be blockbusters or whatever. And I was only 12 years old at the time, and it was a Sunday rainy day. I had a Windows 98 computer, Microsoft Word, and I just started tapping keys basically. And this is why my brother and my dad were at football. I would stay at home and write, and that's how it started basically. And it wasn't really for a long time after that that I finally started taking it seriously. I dabbled in and out of writing between then. I should have been studying for my exams when I was 15, 16. I chose not to and chose to write instead. I find that is worth it now. It probably wasn't back then because the grades did suffer. But I've still got the notepads. I've still got the Tesco Value notepad with full of my sci-fi stories about robots in the future. I plan to one day publish them. I plan to one day do that. That is what this journey is all for. It's for that first story. And yeah, that's kind of where it began. And it wasn't a few years later. I was in my early 20s really when I finally decided I've done the reading. I've lived a little. Maybe it's time to try and do this. But I did always know from the very start that writing a book is a pain in the ass. I knew that from the start. And I'd sometimes think, this is, yeah, you got to think of so many different moving parts, and to put a story together takes a lot. I knew it, and I knew that from the offset, but I was just so passionate about reading, being immersed in stories. It finally kind of hit me. Why don't I create my own immersive experience? And that's where it drove from, really.
That it's really interesting. I think having that original story in your mind or on the paper still as something you really want to accomplish. We've had a few people in that situation and they don't know about that story, or they've said, I'll never do that story because their writing at that time was not good or whatever. But I love the fact that concept you had then is still something you want to work with. And I think a story about robots now, looking at the future with technology and AI and all of those things, is probably the perfect time to start thinking about that again,
Yeah, definitely. I have rewritten it. I started in 2018 and gradually put it together. It's in quite long form. It's probably 120,000, 130,000 words. I did try to query it a few years ago. I still don't think it's ready. I don't think I'm ready, but I'm full steam ahead at it one day. It's going to happen for me. It's why I'm in writing. And it's nice to have dreams, isn't it? I think it's good to have dreams as an author and aspirations, and that is my one true aim. That story is, I've taken it everywhere with me, and it's on the surface it sounds like the whole romantic notion of being an author, but that is what I truly do it for in writing, is for that first story. And there's a part of me as well that wants to be good enough to do it justice. And I want to be good enough to deliver this story. And as you're right, there's a whole new age of AI and robots and that kind of thing. And the story basically is about robots leaving and then coming back and trying to invade the planet as their own entity. So that's kind of where it is. You'll hear probably more about it one day and a bit more late in the future, basically. But yeah, kind of what drives my writing ultimately.
Yeah.
Lee, can you remember when you first felt that you'd found your voice? And can you talk us through what that experience was like?
It took some time. I think it took a few books to find, I would say, voice and flow. I think they're kind of the same thing. It's, as I said before, it's earlier, it's a pain in the ass writing. It doesn't get easier, but then sometimes it does. I would say after probably my second or third release, I kind of landed on a point where I have a process. I know how to do this, how I can do it, and kind of went with it from there. It took some time. It took some hours. I mean, hours upon hours of practice. There's probably more books unpublished or that I've started that have never seen the light of day compared to the ones that have, and they're like basically the good outcome ones. But then the rest of them were just spent basically practicing writing. And yeah, finding my voice probably happened between my third and fourth release, I think. And that's placed right on my superhero comedy, that's when it kind of, to me, that's when it felt like I was in my own element, really. Before then, it felt harder. Yeah, that's a really good question, by the way. Really good question.
I was just going to probe you on that. Like, obviously, you said you sort of started to find your voice between that third and fourth book, and a lot of people that are maybe watching the show or listening to the show are probably in a similar situation in terms of maybe they've not written a book yet, or they've got aspirations to do so, or maybe they've written a couple and not quite there. So, what were you doing before you found your voice that was helping you get to that point? And could you give anyone any advice?
I think I was clouded, or maybe even held down, by being within the same genre. And to begin with, when I did start taking the writing seriously, it was that first sci-fi project, and then it was the sequels, then it was the prequels. It was all the same thing over and over again, and there was a lot of repetition there. And I was in the same series, and it became very nuclear. Basically, I was in the same place. And I think branching out to another genre is what really helped. Basically, it spread kind of my ability, and I kind of now have the belief that most writers, well, I definitely think that most writers can write in any genre. As long as you develop your process and your voice, you can probably take it to any genre. And I've done that, and I will continue to do that, and I continue to believe in that, basically.
Agus muted himself.
I have. I saw it flashing as well. I find it really interesting that you've written in multiple genres, and obviously you write playwrights as well. So I'd love to know the difference between those at some stage. But even your latest book, which we'll talk about in a bit, is like a Western horror. And you've mentioned comedy, superhero comedies, and paranormal romance. So why do you feel like you're drifting through so many different genres? And is there one you feel like you will settle on at some stage?
Yeah, I mean, my home genre will always be probably sci-fi and horror and now comedy. But yeah, it kind of just felt like, what's next, basically. I've done this now, what's next? I want to try and experience as many things as possible. And I'm not as kind of nuclear about it now. I keep using that word nuclear, but I'm not as like directly addicted to it. I got kind of bitten by the writing and publishing bug and got addicted to it quite quickly, got hooked on it. And so for the 4 or 5 years, I was just kind of focused on churning out books, and going as many different places as possible, going to many different experiences in my life as possible. And they all come from different corners of my experience in life. An example would be this paranormal romance, The Ghost Beside Me, is based upon a lot of real experience I've had. The place where I used to live, in Oxfordshire, in a small town called Watlington, the house I lived in was 1700s. It was a listed building. I know you guys are going to be going to a haunted house in Canada at some point. I'm a skeptic. I've never seen anything, but I felt something and I've heard something. And in that bedroom, like clockwork, I would be woken up at a certain hour nearly every time I fell asleep in that room. And I had this feeling something was watching me. So I used that, and I thought, why don't we expand upon that? We could use that concept, that bedroom, base it all in one room, and a guy's living in there. He's maybe under duress at work. He's got a lot of stress going on, and he develops, first of all, makes contact with something in that room, and then it goes further and further, and it becomes basically the ghost of a person that he then connects with in a romantic way. Basically, I thought the paranormal romance bit would probably be the selling point. Really, you can't just have someone sitting in a room being disturbed or poked by a ghost. That's kind of boring. But the romance part, I thought I could do this. It's 59 pages long. If it is a little bit awkward and wooden, that's okay. We'll do the story, then get out. And I think I've achieved what I wanted to achieve with it. I think it is a love story, and it's also a powerful paranormal romance. And yeah, that's kind of a part of my experience in life, that that kind of experience set me off on a course to then take it way further fictionally and turn the volume all the way up. And that's kind of what I did, basically.
Nice. I'd love to think that when we go away, if we do get to go away, that Chris will be woken up by a romantic ghost. That would be hilarious.
In the middle of the night by anything, I get that'd be okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, writing different genres is a tricky accomplishment, but also writing playwrights must be very different to writing novels. So what's the major difference there? And do you actually have a preference on writing novels or playwright?
I'm more of a novel. I prefer novels. You can basically explore more of your writing ability with a novel, whereas most of my plays are essentially just dialogue, and they're all dialogue based. And I'm 6 or 7 plays in now, and I really love writing them. I write them for my local drama club. I've written pantomimes. The first thing I wrote was a 1-act comedy. It was basically a murder mystery comedy. It was like the British version, fast version of The Naked Gun, basically. It was silly, it was stupid, but it was fun, it was freedom. The drama club I belonged to was so good to just let me cast all of my friends in this show, and we had a good time doing it. But then they trusted me later on to do pantomimes, which is kind of their bread and butter. They're a non-profit, but they make their money to pay the rent, pay for the lighting, tech, costumes through pantomime. So they entrusted me to write a pantomime, which I did, and I've done 6 or 7 of them. And well, the key difference between novels and pantomimes and plays is basically dialogue. And in the last few years, the demand has become more towards plays, because I've kind of, I wouldn't say got bored of writing books, but I've been writing less books, and my attention more has been on plays. So I've then come back after a few years away from publishing books and released Last Outlaw. And one of the key compliments I've got in many of the reviews is that the dialogue is really good. So I think basically the dialogue muscle of my writing persona is being flexed by writing these plays. And a lot of the work is not really done by me in the play. I write the script, put the stage directions in, put the various cues in, but then leave it to them, and my work's sort of done. And whereas a novel, you're kind of taking the reader all the way through the experience, whereas I kind of put it down and give it to the performers to be in, and then the director will direct it, and it will be a success, and it will be it's a very, very weird thing to do, watch your writing come to life. It's still something I'm not used to, even though I've seen it so many times. One of the most rewarding things, but I think the most rewarding part of my writing is not seeing the plays come to life. It's seeing the performers have the time of their life up on that stage, making friends, making memories. That's the bit I enjoy seeing, and that's driven by a story I've written. That's wonderful, basically.
Yeah, that is incredible.
Yeah.
It sounds fantastic. So as a master of dialogue then, what tips can you give someone that may be struggling or wants to improve on their dialogue writing?
You have to act it out loud a lot of the time. You have to talk to yourself. Talking to yourself is kind of, I think, a rite of passage for most writers. I think I'm always getting caught by someone talking to myself and trying to style it out that I'm on the phone, I've got an earpiece in or something. That's a big one. Talking to yourself, acting out the dialogue as well. I watch a lot of films, TV. There's a lot of good shows of good dialogue. Most writers are in writing because they were inspired by something in that regard. And yeah, dialogue is found in so many good TV shows and films. Like high-end stuff, we're talking like a Martin Scorsese film, the dialogue second to none in some of his films. And then TV shows as well. And you look at like Breaking Bad. That's a brilliant TV show where the dialogue is exceptional. Downton Abbey, not a massive fan of it. It will be on in the background here at home, but you can appreciate the dialogue, and it's watching other people, learning from watching, basically, and talking to yourself a lot.
So Lee, tell us a little bit about your process. So first of all, what does your day-to-day look like? And then what makes an idea worth writing about for you?
Well, my day-to-day, it's taken over a lot these days. The last few years, it's been taken over by I'm not going to say this is a bad thing. I don't think it is. I think it's great. But my social media following and my social media presence takes up a lot of my time. My blogging endeavors and my reading, that takes up some time. Again, it's all stuff I enjoy, so it's fine. My Patreon creation as well, that takes up a lot of what I do. I still get time to write. I still do. If I'm writing a project, I will make that my priority as well. And what was the second question? Sorry.
Just what makes an idea worth writing to you? Like, obviously, if you're somebody who has an active imagination, you've got loads of ideas popping up all the time. What makes you go, "Oh, I'm going to write about that one," and just put that one on the back burner for now?
Basically, an idea will have to stay with me for an extended amount of time, and then it suddenly becomes compelling to me. If it's in my mind for a while and it's starting to bug me, and then it will start growing to the point where I'm going to start forgetting how much this has grown, so I need to now write it down. And that's basically the point. And I'll either write down just basic plot points and put it away, or I'll just start writing it then if I'm not currently writing anything. I'll just decide after so long something has been in my head and it grows basically. If it keeps growing to a point where I can no longer control it, I have to put it down on page.
Nice. Is that similar for you, Chris? When do you think an idea is good enough to go with?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I asked the question, but I don't have a response. Normally, I'm quite the opposite. Like, if I have one idea, I'm like, "Oh, I'll write that," and then now I've got like 2 books on the go, and I can't have any other ideas because there's nothing that I can entertain at the minute until they're finished. So yeah, I think I'm a one-track person. Like, I don't, if something pops up, I'm not going to entertain it. So if it's a good idea for me, it'll come back again in the future, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'd like to know the answer to that from people who may be watching or listening. When do you think an idea is good enough to go with? I think what Lee said is very similar to myself, where it's in my mind and I'm obsessed with it, and then that's it. Okay, what we're going to do, Lee, is we're going to go into part 2, which is what's the story. So when we come back from this very short video, can you tell us what the Last Outlaw is all about?
Yeah, of course.
Excellent. So Lee, the Last Outlaw, tell us about it.
Well, Last Outlaw is a Western horror novella set in the turn of 20th century in a small town in America known as Haddington. And basically there is a small diminishing gang of, I would say, outlaws, those on the wrong side of the law, who just happen to be in town when a haul of gold is coming through, and this haul of gold is being stored in the local bank until it's moved on to the next town. And so these criminals or these outlaws are approached by an old friend who happens to live in the town about perhaps doing a bank heist. But that's just really a cover for the fact that this town is infested with monsters, and there's a hive mind thing going on with all the locals, and it's all a bit clicky. And so these couple of outlaws, who are basically an adopted daughter and father duo, they end up in the middle of this storm of all these monsters and creatures, and they have to team up with a local marshal. There's a creature hunter that comes in, and yeah, they have to try and survive the night. But it's about blending the lines between law and outlaw. Criminals and lawmen are having to align in order to basically survive. That's what it's about. And yeah, I had an incredible amount of fun writing it. Western is one of my favorite genres, and yeah, glad to have done it. Really, it's been a really good experience doing.
I was going to ask what the inspiration was for going in down this road in terms of Western and sort of horror. So it's obviously you're a fan of the Westerns. Is there anything specific that may have prompted this story?
Yeah, so I wrote this first draft of this in 2020. It was always supposed to be a short story, like what it is, what it represents. And well, the year before, I was playing video game Red Dead Redemption, Red Dead Redemption 2 anyway, which is a wonderful game. That partly inspired me to think, I quite fancy a Western. There's a huge part of it as well that Last Outlaw is set in the same town as my debut book, Open Evening, but just 100 years previously. So it felt like a natural fit, because I don't think I could just do a Western like kind of love story or a Western like epic. It would have to be a blend of two genres. And I know horror very well. I know fast-paced horror very well, and using the already established setting just 100 years before, basically. And another big driver for that and inspiration for that was I'm a big fan of the Back to the Future trilogy, and in the third film, which is a kind of a departure from the other two, they go back to the Old West, and I thought it would be nice to do that to my first book, do a version of that and go back to 100 years before, and that's basically where it comes from, really.
I like that story. And do you think, is there a connection between the two stories being in the same location, or is it completely separate?
Yes, that's similar sort of thing happens in my first book, Open Evening, except Open Evening is a high school horror set in this town where a similar sort of thing would happen that happened in Last Outlaw. And so, yeah, it's kind of a switch of times, but the same sort of thing happens basically, and they are connected, but they can also both be enjoyed as standalone as well.
Yeah,
I think an important thing for me as an indie author is to make most of my books as standalone as possible while also having series value, because I'm always trying to pick up new readers, and I've written sequels. I've got a 5-part series out there. The first 3 books in the series can be standalone for marketability, because it's super hard to find readers as an indie author. And yeah, I thought, let's make it semi standalone, but also we'll put in a few Easter eggs for the eagle-eyed, and that's kind of what we went with. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, if you could describe The Last Outlaw in just 3 words, what 3 words could you describe it as?
Shadows and horror.
What was the first one there? Sorry, I missed it.
Heist.
Heist.
Yeah, heist, shadow, horror. Yeah.
Nice. I like that.
Nice. Lee, let's dig into your expertise a little bit in terms of, I'm really interested about any tips that you can give for writing horror, or any tips that you could give for writing comedy, because those two genres are notoriously difficult. And I think it'd be great if you could give a few tips to people listening and watching.
Yeah. Horror for me is kind of all about pacing. I think it's all about my horror is generally fast paced. There's always something happening, and that kind of heightens the sense of, like, a lot of my horror, there's unpredictability in there. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of there's either movement, or there's dialogue, or there's action. There's always something happening in my horror. I think horror can be very sensory like that, and partnered with some description. Again, that's probably not my strong point anymore, but with some description and some strong dialogue, you got a good chance of telling a good horror story. And like a lot of my books, they're all rooted in some kind of truth. And I think if you can find something within your story that you've experienced yourself that makes it just that little bit more real. Like it could be just an emotion, it could be a person you've faced, it could be a situation you've been in yourself. My debut book, Open Evening, is based a lot on my school days, basically, and the politics of being at school. And that kind of makes it a real place to be. So it's a real setting, but then obviously there's monsters and fantastical creatures and stuff like that. That's the fictional element. But as long as there's something within to make it real, it will basically hook in readers. It will make them think there's something in here that's real. And you could probably say the same about comedy as well. Comedy is a difficult one,
Yeah.
because the world is changing so much. The way the world perceives comedy so much these days compared to even 5 years ago, it's moved on a lot. There's a lot of people being afraid in case you offend someone, and I very much understand that. You could use a certain phrase today, and in 10 years time it might not be as kind of accepted. In my comedy, I try to be as honest as I possibly can, try to be as sort of quick-witted as I can as well, in terms of dialogue, lots of backwards and back and forth. It's kind of hard to describe how to achieve comedy, but I think you can find humor even in darkness. There's always something to laugh about, even if it is a real sad situation you're in. There's always reason to find laughter. And I mean, the key reason why I wrote a comedy was to come away from the heaviness of thrillers and horrors and just have fun. Basically, if you can find something that's fun in your writing, it will flow. Yeah, do what comes naturally. Basically, with comedy, it's I've always thought the best gift you can give someone is making them laugh. And over many, many years, I've had lots of practice just sitting round a dinner table, just trying to make fun of myself. And yeah, comedy is a gift. And I think even today, I mean, my comedy plays, they're pantomime, so they are a British institution, which helps. But, the gags, the one-liners, they're still very modern, and you can still get away with digging at yourself or digging at the local politician or whatever, as long as it's not too heavy. And yeah, just go for it, basically, in both genres.
Just another question on that, because I feel like we're getting somewhere with the insight. Are you ever afraid when you're writing the horror, and do you ever laugh when you're writing the comedy? And I know it sounds like a bit of a strange question, but when I find that I've attempted comedy, I've gone, oh, that's funny, and I've written it down, and I've not necessarily laughed at it, but I know somebody else will probably laugh. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. There will be one or two lines in a script, I say, that I will find funny, and I will laugh out loud at them. My granddad Ray, God rest his soul, he's no longer with us. He was renowned for laughing at his own jokes, and I'm exactly the same. But not everything will make me laugh. And it's sometimes unexpected what the audience actually laugh at too. And there's stuff that you think is a bang-on gag that I love. It's my type of humor, and it's crickets in the audience. And I mean, at that point, I feel so sorry for the performer who's thought this is going to work. We've laughed at it every rehearsal, and then the audience have just not found it funny. But then something really unexpected has become funny. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a balance, because you're so in the detail of constructing it. You see how it's made, so you probably won't find it as funny. So that's normal. What you're saying there is normal, and the same with horror as well. I don't really get scared of my own stuff, I would say. First of all, and might sound a little bit weird, but as a horror author, I quite enjoy being scared. I enjoy horror films. I enjoy the occasional jump scare. They're done way too frequently, probably, in films now, but every now and then I like a good scare. So with that in mind, maybe I'm a little bit numbed to it, so I don't really find my stuff scary as much as I see something that's maybe quite scary in my work, and I'll be like, someone would appreciate that. on the scary side. It's quite difficult horror. Yeah, I don't really get scared by my own stuff. I'm quite hard to scare anyway, really. I did used to have a boss who would jump out on me behind doors. So when someone does that now, I'm completely numb to it because I'm so used to expecting somebody jumping out on me. But yeah, that's just a personal story. But yeah,
I don't think I can ever get used to that. A similar situation in work for me. Someone keeps jumping out on me, and now every time I come out that door, the same door every time, he's like, "Well, I'm not going to do it again until you least expect it." So, I expect it every single time. I can't help it. Halo says, "What do you get when you cross a writer with a deadline? A really clean house."
yeah, that's relatable. Very,
Yeah.
very relatable.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, jokes. Very difficult to write in horror. Yeah, I agree. What we're going to do very shortly is move on to part 3 of the show, which is where we ask Lee our staple questions. And if you have questions for Lee as well, please put them in the chat now, and we will try and get around to them as well. So before we move on to the staple questions, Chris, do you have any more questions? And in fact, I know you've got a blog as well, so I think we might be able to get some more tips out of this.
Yeah, I suppose the last question I've got is who would enjoy this book?
Who would enjoy it? What, Last Outlaw?
Yeah.
First and foremost, fans of Red Dead Redemption would definitely get something out of it. I've compared it also to another video game, The Last of Us, because there's a dynamic within the book of an adopted father-daughter relationship. I think anybody who has been in a situation when they have been, say you're a young person in a workforce and someone older has just been deliberately crappy to you for no reason other than your age. This is very specific, but it's part of one of the experiences in my life I've had when I was an apprentice. I was an apprentice electrician, and there's a generation teaching you. Every now and then someone will say, "Oh, you don't know you're born," or "you," and it's okay, mate, I'm just trying to learn my trade here. Please stop chewing me out. But there's a part of that's being sort of giving the next generation a chance, because in the book there is a bit of a coming of age situation where this adopted father must kind of let the daughter go and find her own way. And basically anyone who's been in that situation, from friends to parents, it would definitely appeal to them. Now, of course, there is also the fast-paced horror element for anybody who enjoys creature features. People who enjoy aliens would definitely enjoy Last Outlaw. There's a lot of that dynamic in there, a lot of the shadows, a lot of that kind of thing. And we could even go old school, and for anybody who enjoys the likes of Bram Stoker's Dracula, there's a very specific character in the book who would do very well in that environment, a very Van Helsing sort of style character. So for anyone who likes that sort of traditional literature would enjoy Last Outlaw, I think.
Yeah, I was definitely getting Dracula vibes, and for some reason when you were talking about it, I was like, that does sound like there could be some creepiness going on. And when you mentioned it before, sounds great.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Okay, what we're going to do is move on to part 3 of the show. Community questions. We'll ask some staple questions, and if you have questions for Lee, send them in now. If you're watching it back or listening back, I'm sure Lee wouldn't mind if you sent some questions his way on social media or to us, and we can pass them on, and we'll try and do that if we can. So here we go. Community questions. So, Lee, I'll kick us off today. If you could take any character from the world of fiction and drop that character into, say, The Last Outlaw, what character from the world of fiction are you going to take and why?
I mean, I would probably, as a Back to the Future fan, I'm going to say Doc Brown, just for the fact he'd probably say Great Scott quite a lot. quite a lot. Sorry. But yeah, he's always been a character that's resonated with me. He's always got a solution for something. He's always got some fantastical way of trying to get out of something, and he's an inventor. He's quite inventive. I think he would probably fit quite well in the dynamic of. So in the book, there are an unlikely band of heroes that put together, and you could easily slot Doc Brown in there. That'd be quite interesting. I mean, how he would get there, of course, it might be through the DeLorean. So maybe the DeLorean's parked in a cave somewhere nearby. As you can tell, Last Outlaw might have been a little bit inspired by Back to the Future 3. But yeah, definitely Doc Brown.
Nice.
Nice. I can't remember all the staple questions because it's been a while since we. I'm going to throw a different one at you that I literally just thought of. If you could give somebody a must-read book and a must-avoid book,
Ooh,
what 2 books would they be?
Ooh,
that's a cheeky question, Chris.
so, I mean, I read and review a lot of indie books, and there's some great indie books out there. Last year, I read a whole range of different genres and lengths, whatnot. I'm going to say there's a book I particularly enjoyed. It's a cozy murder mystery. It's called Murder at the Pirate Festival by Abigail Yardimchi, and it's based in a fictional sort of South Coast town where a murder takes place at a pirate festival. And I just really enjoyed it. I loved every minute of it. It's quite modern as well. I think the main character has ADHD, and it was just really refreshing to read. And I would highly recommend that to anyone. It's called Murder at the Pirate Festival. Yeah, a book to avoid. I'm pretty hard to convince to put a book down. In fact, I would probably, from memory, there's probably only really one book I've ever put down and not been able to complete. And I tried several times. It might come as a surprise, it might not. The Born Identity by Robert Ludlum. I just could not finish it. I could not get into it. No matter how many times I've tried a lot, I've still got the copy and I've still tried. And I just cannot get into it. And I don't know whether I get bogged down in it. I don't know if it's boring, if it's just not something not resonating with me. But that is, yeah, the one book I could never been able to finish, basically.
Yeah. Wow. Good answer. Good recommendation as well. I think I might check that out. Okay, if you could take the ending of anything fictional, be a TV show, a film, or a book, and change the ending, what ending would you change and why?
As a huge Michael Crichton fan, I would probably, and this might be controversial because Jurassic Park is a masterpiece, I would change the ending of Jurassic Park. I would make it more true to the novel. And now the novel is way more hardcore than the film. The film is more of a family fun adventure compared, but the ending kind of hammers home the threat of one particular species of dinosaur, the velociraptors, who basically are way more intelligent than people realize, and they've grown in their numbers, and they've basically about to take over the island, obviously before it gets napalmed essentially. So I would have done something probably like that with the ending, but then you probably have to change the rest of the film as well. I'm not going to criticize the film at all. Jurassic Park is one of my favorite films. I mean, I wore out several VHS copies of it as a kid, but I would love to see a version that would be true to the novelization, which is a fantastic read, by the way.
Nice. I would like to see that as an ending. It would be good. Okay, a couple of questions from the guys in the audience. Anya, thank you. Do you think the TV show Firefly would work with horror vibes?
Yes, God, yes. I mean, it's kind of there in some of the episodes. Is it All Out of Gas when they're running out of air on Firefly and it's all getting quite desperate? That worked really well. A lot of tension. Yeah, and the final episode as well, when the bounty hunter comes on board and starts picking off the crew. It's near enough already ready made, isn't it? You could a space type horror would really work with Firefly. Definitely, I would love to see that.
Yeah, Serenity was kind of spooky-ish. Okay, thank you. And Taylor says, which of your characters is most like you? Great question. And which is most unlike you?
Wow, that's a great question. So there are a lot of characters that have similarities to me, or there are different versions of me. I would probably say the character that is most like me is Kurt Wiseman from The Teleporter, my superhero comedy, the main character. Very much a slouch, like what I'm doing now. You probably can't see the camera is not showing me currently slouching. Into his vices, very addictive nature in his personality. That will kind of sometimes be a good thing and a bad thing. Like him, I got addicted to yoga, which was really good for my back. But then, I also have had so many other issues of, I mean, my 20s died a very slow death. I shouldn't have been kind of going out as much as I did in my late 20s, and very much like him. Yeah, that's definitely Kurt Wiseman is definitely me. Basically, there's more of me in Kurt Wiseman than anywhere else, any other book. Probably the least like me characters. That's a great question as well. Trying to think, and yeah, I mean, there's a wide array of books. I'm probably going to say Edward Neville, who is the main character of my paranormal romance, The Ghost Beside Me. Yeah, I'm probably not anything like him compared to any other character. He's very introverted, to the point where it kind of becomes, I don't want to say destructive, but a point where he's unable to talk to people because he has got no confidence and stuff. I mean, I used to be like him probably, but I've evolved. Doing stage work, being on stage has given me that confidence in life to talk to people and be able to do this kind of thing. I never would have imagined I'll be able to do this 10 years ago. So yeah, I'm going to say Edward Neville. Great question.
Nice.
So Lee, if you had to transfer one of your novels into a play, which novel would you pick and what would you do with it?
So I would love to do The Ghost Beside Me. So paranormal romance. The story is pretty much based in one room, so there'll be one set. I have thought about this. I thought about doing it as well. I might eventually do it. The way my local drama club works is that we do 2 productions a year, but there's a lot of performers. This would only have 2 or 3 performers in it, so it'd be very much like a side project for the club if we ever did it. And it would be set up. The bedroom will be set up on stage, and I always like the idea of, because in The Ghost Beside Me, I don't want to give a lot of it away, but the ghost, Molly, lies next to Edward in bed on a stage that wouldn't be too visible. So I'd have the bed basically propped up. And so they're face to face on stage in a bed, and it'd be quite a visual thing. Dry ice, that type of thing, some cool lighting, a few effects. I would probably also expand on it a little bit more and make it a bit more horror as opposed to just paranormal. There isn't really. I'm a horror author, so I'm kind of numb to it. But currently, in its current form, it's not that scary. But you could make it a lot scarier, and I would definitely try and go towards sort of direction of The Woman in Black, that type of haunting. I would put a bit of that in there just to give the audience a good scream, basically.
Nice. Brilliant. Chris, ask the looking back at your life question, and then we'll wrap it up as we're hitting the hour mark very, very shortly.
So you're on your deathbed, you're looking back at your writing career. What would you be happy with? What is success to you?
Being able to do this for as long as I can and get something positive out of it. I think ultimately there are so many wonderful things that come from writing that you can get out of writing. But to me being at a laptop, pecking away, putting out a story, putting a story together, that's what I want to do with my life, basically. And that's what I am doing around work. I have a day job, of course, but to be able to do that for as long as I possibly can, and for as long as I can keep the passion for it, and as long as it can always be something I get positivity from, that's basically where I would like to leave it with, basically.
Nice. It's a great answer. I love it.
Thank you.
Okay, finally, before we do finish this off, and it's been a wonderful conversation, where can people find out more information about you? Where can they find your blog and follow you on social media?
So you can find me predominantly on Twitter at lhallwriter. You can find me on my blog, my Hall of Information blog. It's leehallwriter.com. I'm also on YouTube and Patreon as well. Again, they're the same handle as my Twitter at lhallwriter. Yeah, that's pretty much
Brilliant. Amazing. Thank you very much for everyone that tuned in and your questions. There were some brilliant questions in the chat tonight. As always, I want to say spectacular show. Oh, thank you so much, Halo. Your spectacular support. Thank you. Yeah, brilliant. Have a very, very good weekend, and we'll see if we can get more information on Lee in the description, and there's links to the website and all that good stuff. Look out for the tweets and the promotions about the Kickstarter, and look forward to next week's show as well. And we'll see if we can reunite Chris with the Playboy Bunny interview. We'll see if we can make that happen again, just out of entertainment value. But yes, thank you, everybody. Lee, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story with us. It was great.
Thank you for having me. It's been nice to connect with both of you. Thank you for the opportunity.
You're very welcome. For me, it's goodbye, and all of us, have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.